So yeah, like I said, other people need this activity, aren't getting it, so we're going to record it for them. If you've got any questions, ask them, because they're probably the same questions that these guys are having. So what I'm going to do is I want to put together a 2D sketch and a 3D drawing, and this is the sort of communication that you should be trying to get into your Unit 9. It sort of covers all the bases for the informal 2D sketching and drawing side of things. And if you can get it to this sort of standard and pick up some of these notes, you'll have distinction criteria that you can assess with. So, range of ideas. Picking up on a range of ideas I'm going to go for a square first. I'm thinking about how I can work with a block. A very simple clamp. So I've got this idea. You know the project that you've done downstairs with the clamp, that's the toolmaker's clamp, yeah. And it has sort of two running bars going through it, and those two running bars sort of operate off some sort of screw thread. Forward so that people can see it. And what we're going to do is for the circular object that we're going to hold, I'm just going to sort of put two curves in. So I'll keep it about as simple as a drawing as I can. Now I'm drawing in a blue marker. I like blue marker. I'm going to leave that. I won't rub anything out. I'm just going to colour over it, and it'll get darker, and you won't notice this, and it'll give it a nice sketchy feel. Do that in pencil, do it in ballpoint pen, it's up to you. Sometimes working in a sort of lighter colour gives you the opportunity to sort of do the sketching first. This is the hard work, the thinking. I'm going to need some little pads in here to cushion the object if I'm going to be holding it. I've got the screw threads that are going to go across here. There might be some sort of motor up here. And it's going to slide on that so it can open and close and hold the object. So I've got that sort of part of my drawing there. It's translating that from 2D into 3D that we really struggle. But the reason I've gone for something like a simple design like this is if you, and we'll just do a little thing here, if you want isometric, you need 30-degree angles. Now you can get a protractor, that's fine. Or a little trick for you is draw two squares, like so, and simply find that halfway point there. And if you sketch out a line, you'll get an angle of about 30 degrees. Now, for drawing this in 3D, what I need is just an isometric set of rectangles, almost like a cube, but this front end is going to be quite short. If you imagine we'd sort of do the engineering drawing of this, you know, that would be sort of 10 millimeters by 20 millimeters, or whatever decision I want to make. You know, I want to grip something, so maybe we'd call that 30 millimeters, and that would be half of that, so let's call that 15, and we'd go like that. So in that case, I'm going to need that on my rectangle that I'm going to work in here. So 2D to 3D, there's my 2D.
Would the halfway not be like 22 and a half?
It would be, but it's like, it's an angle. Yeah, it's not 45 degrees, which is too steep, and it's not too shallow, it's just somewhere in between, so it gives me an angle. But I like the fact that you've done the maths. I'm impressed. That was shocked, because I couldn't do that in my head. How have you done that?
45 divided by 2.
45 divided by 2. Cool. That's clever. Right, so my design's quite simple. It's effectively just sort of two rectangles like so. And then I can see the inside. Again, if I'm doing this very lightly in pen, I can draw an object, and then I can draw over the object. I've got two holes, so I've got two ellipses, and they're going to line up all the way through, like so. And then I've got my two curved areas here. That line's not quite in the right place, and this is the great thing about working in a lighter pen. If it's not, the line's not in the right place, you can just fix it. You just fix your drawing. Well, actually, we could do with these being a little bit longer, so just pull those out a little bit. And I've got a rough outline of how my design is going to look on the page. I've got a bit of space for some text, and I'll show you what I want you to do there. And you'll notice I've got a bit of an outline box. to frame everything. That's going to cut through there. So it sort of sets that up on its page on its own. That's the creative bit, that's the hard bit to some extent. The next bit is, to some extent, it's colouring in. It's lining it out and colouring it in. Get yourself a dark marker, hopefully something that's got 2 thicknesses, or get a thin marker and just do 2 lines twice. And like I said, this is just the formal part of your drawing. You could do this with a ruler. So if you wanted these lines to be really neat, you know, you could put a ruler on it. I like it to be a little bit loose and a little bit sketchy. And now I'm starting to think about textures. This is a screw thread, so it's going to be a little bit like, but I'm just trying to create that illusion. Put a few lines across it. And you can start to, and I just want, when somebody's viewing this as a drawing, I just want them to recognise that these are threaded bark. So I've just put little lines across it just to create that sort of message. There's that motor. And these pads here, so I want to sort of draw attention. So I've decided that I'm going to colour code as I go through my drawing. Everything that's to do with a cushion or a pad, I'm just going to use a yellow on each of my sketches. And then people sort of, as you go from drawing to drawing, you'll start to recognise, it's almost like an accent to the drawing. It adds a little bit of splash of colour, draws attention to it, but at the same time you get a message going through all the designs. Ah, that's the bit where it's cushioning. It's a little bit of colour coding. I want this to be metal. I'm thinking it's probably going to be made out of aluminium. I write that on there. So I'm going to start labelling, you know, materials and stuff like that, so that I'm also getting the materials and manufacturing part of the assessment. You know, have I identified materials? You've got a research section that's separate, and you'll need to do that research section, and that will inform your decisions about what material. So if I want this to look a little bit like aluminium, I'm going to go back to my blue pen and I'm going to give it some little highlights. Just some little reflective lines. Metals tend to reflect in straight lines. So I haven't got a massive amount of colouring in to do. And then I've got a design. This border is going to come across here, through there. It's going to drop down through there. I'm going to use these later on. That's going to be a sort of an important factor. If I draw a line across there, a dotted line, it's a bit like doing an engineering drawing. That section there is something that I'm going to do some maths and calculations on.
Oh, so we are actually going to be cutting it out.
So
it looks like it's cutting out on the cloud.
So there'll be a curve. Yeah. So you'd have a piece of aluminium, and then we cut this curve into the aluminium. So I'm going to describe that in my notes. Yeah. I'm also interested in this thickness here. The depth there would be about 10 millimetres.
And it's only really going to be useful for one object.
But that was the brief was to hold an aluminium cylinder.
Okay.
If we were going for like a more complex grabber, then you're right, we would definitely go for much more complex ideas. And if you've got more complex ideas, there's no reason why you shouldn't record them now. If you suddenly have a brilliant idea, because you might not need it for this project, but you can definitely use it for a different project. I'm going to do the same thing here. All I'm doing is just outlining the drawing, really. This is firming up the decisions that I've made. Just remember I extended this slightly. So the blue lines are now fading into the background. There's my screw thread. Want that to line up with that. Curves are a bit tricky, it must be said. Take a bit of practice. Okay, put a bit of colour down there. Working with very sort of soft felt tip pens does give you this sort of much more easy flow. Softer tip of the pen and that, and you can also get the thickness going. And one of the things that you can do is to get a drawing to stand off the page. You can see that this is sort of 3D, but actually to help it stand off the page more is go for a darker outline all around. again with a slightly softer tip pen, and that darker outline helps it, we call it outlining, and it helps the object stand off the page. Now, we always say that the light's coming from the left, it's coming from this sort of direction. So if I do a little bit of a reflection shining that way, just remind myself that's where the light's coming from. Where will the shadows be? Well, the top bit's going to pick up some horizontal shading. Just imagine that the light's catching the metal and it's reflecting the light. This edge is going to be medium and this side's going to be dark. So most of this is going to pick up. I'm mimicking the diagonal that I had here, the reflection. This is going to be somewhere in between. So I've got light, medium and dark shading on my design. I've got highlights that suggest the texture. I've got the texture of the screw threads coming through there. I'm going to add a bit of shadow in there with those, because again, like I say, the light will be shining on them from this side and that will create a shadow. What have we got there? I'm already noticing I've made a mistake here. These two pieces here comes down far too far. I'm going to live with that. You know, if I was going to a client, I'd be redrawing this. But for my purposes at the moment, it's just illustrating the point. It should have stopped on these two circles. When I drew those, those should have gone up there like that.
In the wrong direction.
And I've gone in the wrong direction. Make mistakes. You'll notice actually when you look at this, I'm actually working upside down as well. So I'm working your way, not my way. So it does make it a little bit more tricky. So not worrying about that. So I'm going to go with my yellow.
Not as tricky as writing aluminium upside down.
Well, I gave up, as you'll notice. I'm not good at spelling at the best of times. Doing it upside down at the same time is pretty rough. Alumin.
Yeah.
Does that look right? Maybe I can do it that way. Maybe I can work on here like this. So I'd said that was no 10 millimeters. We're going to do the second moment of area on these. So the next sort of the follow-up video to this will be actually doing some calculations. But I would encourage you using your research on the materials and manufacturing. So for me, for this, I think the manufacturing process would be, so maybe I'll give myself a little title here, and I would just have a little block of text that says, I'm going to use aluminium because it's stiff, it's hard, but it's light, it's reasonably hard wearing, it's easy to machine, so it's easy to manufacture. And in reality, you could cast this shape, but I think it's a lot of hard work when you could just buy some. If you could buy stock material, so I'd be talking about stock material here, I'm going to buy stock aluminium, and I've maybe got a milling machine that's going to simply mill out this shape, and a drill that's going to drill these two holes, and I've basically got the two components that I need. I'm obviously going to need to cut a thread through here. It's 30 millimeters wide, so it would be, you know, I don't quite know what I'd go for there for a thread, maybe an 8mm thread, something like that. These are decisions you can start making on your drawing, but remember, it isn't a final idea. So there's time for you to go away and think about it. I'm going to save this space here, and what you will see here is I'm going to do the cross-section. I'm going to calculate the cross-sectional area, and then I'm going to calculate the inertia, the second moment of area. And then I can evaluate this design against other designs, saying, well, you know, it is strong enough, or it could be stronger, or is there a way that I could make this design work and use even less material but get more structure? So are you happy with that as a layout and transferring from 2D to 3D? Okay? That's really what I want you to push on. Not just one idea, 2 or 3 ideas done like this. So if you've got your sort of 2D sketches that you're doing last lesson, you might have sort of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of those. You're picking out 3 or 4 now, and you're starting to think to yourself, how would I get this actually made? What would I actually need to do? Good? Good. I'll leave it at that.